Hello and welcome to another video. So today we're taking a look at a Lion Bunny deck. They seem to be reasonably popular right now. I do actually have two variations of this deck which only vary by about 5 card difference, and I will be covering the other variation probably in a few days. I want to have a little bit of separation between them, but at least just to give you guys a heads up, there are going to be a couple of similar decks as far as these go. They're just different techs, and I want to test them out and do videos just to kind of see how they stack up. But we're going to get right into this one and check it out, as it is quite a fun little deck to play. The first matchup is against Dragon, a very common matchup, so no real surprise there. I do have all the chest event rewards. I was quite happy to earn all them. They definitely have changed the chest event. It used to be a nightmare when it first started. It's definitely much better these days. You can pretty easily get all the chest rewards within the first 2 days, which is nice. This hand is actually not too bad. Starting off with the Sealed Tomb for extra draw power in the early game, since I don't really have anything else to follow up off this, so we definitely want something. Mori, that's a pretty nice one. I am definitely glad that I took that extra draw. And at turn 3, our opponent hasn't really done anything yet, but Dragon can brick sometimes on the first 2 turns. Although turn 2 is a little less likely, but definitely possible. I've had it happen plenty of times. So we've got a okay setup at this point, and we're going to be able to go for the Saint Hairs. Not with the Evo, but I am pretty comfortable with the Saint Hairs like this. We are a little unlucky though, and we end up drawing our other 2, of course, Petras, instead of getting another bunny. I much prefer to get at least 2 bunnies. They're usually the best things to pull. Surprisingly, they decided to target the strongest attack follower. I guess it's not too surprising, but it's definitely an interesting one, leaving the Saint Hairs up to give me extra value into my deck and to be able to go for the Evo effect. And I can also protect my Saint Hairs this turn, so that should help us out, unless they of course have a decent spell removal. And we can start our Holy Lion clock. That's what I love about this deck. It's got a pretty solid early game, and you can pretty easily switch into the Holy Lions mid game. Which, no surprise, you see the pretty early on concede. The bunnies are definitely a super powerful turn for play, especially with an Evo point going second, but going first not quite as strong, still reasonable. Definitely a card I like to focus on in the early game a little bit. And honestly, this hand is not the worst. Double Petra is a little rough, but it does mean I've got at least the turn 1 and turn 2 play against Portal, which honestly is something I always aim to have. And Lion Temple is going to make up for it a little bit now, which is good. Portal usually is one of my most awkward matchups, just because it is such a strong deck right now. It's no real surprise. I would definitely consider teching in something to deal with both the Maisha risks and, of course, the Omen risk, which Exilia is about the only card I can think of to play on 7, and that kind of cancels both, so, or at least limits them. But in the Lion deck, it can be a little tight to get that onto the board, so. A good Saint Hairs on 4, and we end up getting the triple Saint Hairs play. That's one of my favorites. I love getting that one. I mean, odds were in our favour to get at least 2, but getting all 3 is perfect. Especially on the current board. Unfortunately, their Evolve effect isn't stackable. That would be pretty crazy if it was. Joy of Destruction, of course, really good targeting. They've still got the Evo point, and they're going to have Puppets to, of course, wipe out pretty much everything that this board has. While also setting up a really decent Maisha play later on, as long as they of course don't have to use an Evo point. That's the only downfall in Maisha decks. Having to save on to that Evo point or save another card to trigger it later on can be quite tricky. Holy Lion of Salvation. Not a bad Evo target. I mean, if I don't use hairs, usually it's on these lions. I could have probably went for the Legendary Fighter play, but I don't tend to favour that a lot of the time. It's a nice card, but it's way too predictable, and it's always going to be a guaranteed target from your opponent. The odds of it surviving and you getting a 20-20 damage is almost impossible. I would say out of 90% of games, you're probably not going to trigger it. Maybe in the top 10% you might. And then it's probably 1% where you might get a guaranteed, which is rough. 1 in 100 games, I've probably had that go off when I play decks like this. But it does also, at the same time, make a good forced target. The only real disappointment was I couldn't get a spell off here. I probably could have, honestly, if I had went for the Holy Lion Crystal, but I would have had to free up space, which I just didn't have. Omen of Destruction, plus Papa Room. Papa Room is such a rough card. It just boosts everything so perfectly for Portal right now. I'm not hating on Portal by any means, it just definitely is a real powerhouse of a setup. Now we get our chance to go for a couple of damage. And a nice Bane setup on it too is always good. Our only real hope now is to use Lion Crystals to our advantage and try and draw out for as long as we can without losing too much more health. The Maisha play is definitely the biggest risk. If they can get a Maisha play and defend it, that could be some trouble. But I haven't really seen a lot of decks favoring a guaranteed Maisha combo. I've seen it more as an extra top deck kind of situation than actually a guaranteed lethal. Instead of setting up, you know, cards that lower Maisha's cost, go with a spell, or try and aim for more Evo, or anything like that. It just doesn't tend to go that way as often as, say, other decks. That you really rely on cards like that for a win condition. So there's the Destruction in black, and unfortunately the Entity as well. That's kind of rough. If I had one more board space, it wouldn't have been a problem, but unfortunately, our Owl triggered. And without a way to get rid of it, we couldn't go for lethal this turn. So we are going to have to deal with this 10. Even though we are set up for a lethal next turn, the Maisha play isn't going to help them out yet. So 3 Holy Lions, very easy to do. Not even actually needing the 3, the 2 is actually just going to end up being fine, since they heal at the end of turn, not at the start. Which is great. So overall, I'm reasonably happy with how this deck functions and goes. I'll be interested to see how the other version of this deck that I've got lined up will play. Like I said, it's only a few cards different, but you will see that in probably a few days. Probably in the next 3 or 4 days. I've got some other decks I want to cover in between this, and I don't want to do back-to-back almost identical decks. So if you guys did enjoy this video and are looking forward to the next one, be sure to hit the like button and subscribe for more content. You'll find the link to this deck in the description below. Until next time, see ya.